shadows hide you? I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Here for a chat.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, friend!
Hello and welcome to episode 311 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, September 30th in the evening. It is reset day. From Gadsden, New York, we've got me, Ridiculous Hat. From Karazhan, California, we've got Botticus.
Yo.
From Nomergon, Ohio, we've got Edelweiss.
Hello.
And from where you are, listeners, we've got you, especially those of you that are in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. But listeners, well, we appreciate you. And thank you so much to all of our patrons. No new patrons this week, but those of you that support us, I think that you're great. And those of you that have left us iTunes reviews, Apple Podcast reviews, whatever, thank you so much for doing that. Totally free, but it takes a minute of your time, and your time has value, and it helps other people find the show as well. And also, big thanks to everyone that's given us some positive feedback. Last week's episode about ladder anxiety seemed to resonate with quite a few folks. Gotten a bunch of great feedback on that, so I'm glad that we were able to speak to what people are feeling. And hopefully, y'all shook that off and queued up those games. So, life and ladder. Botticus, you have something written here. Tell us about it.
Speaking of queuing games, not something that I've really been doing.
We could have planned the segue better.
Yeah, and it's not because of ladder anxiety. I'm not really sure what it is, but I've had time on my hands, and I go to the Hearthstone client to queue up a game, and I just don't feel compelled to queue any of the formats, and I'm not really sure why that is. Standard, there just isn't really like a deck that speaks to me. Most of the games I've been queuing have been mage games, with Quest Mage, because like I enjoy that deck, but I don't enjoy the way it makes me feel when I play that deck, because, you know, I killed a warrior from like 72 health or something. I felt kind of bad about it, and they immediately added me, and I knew that was not going to be a good friend request to accept, so I didn't. But yeah, I mean, you just kind of feel, I feel bad about it, but then you also lose a bunch with the deck to anything that doesn't play minions or, you know, has a bunch of face damage. So, I don't know. The deck's okay. It just doesn't it doesn't make me really want to grind and play it a bunch. And then Battlegrounds I've queued up a couple times, and I don't know. I went really hard at it for a while, and I don't know that it changed enough with the balance updates that really makes me want to queue it. And I think the most tragic part is that duels I was really, really enjoying, but because of the changes, I now like think about the treasure combinations I can get, and I'm just not super excited about it. And the whole idea of like nerfing, making the 2 best treasure, or like the 3 best treasures you can get, be extremely rare, just means that I'm not going to see it very often, but if I'm doing well in a run, I'm still going to see it pretty often, and I feel like that's just kind of colors me where I don't really want to queue up that format either. So been struggling to find the urge to play, but I'm sure with like Mercenaries comes out, I'm sure I'll give it a try at least. And you know, when a new set comes out, I'm always excited to play a new set, or maybe see what the mini set has to offer, see what it changes. But it's one of those things, I don't think it's necessarily bad that I don't want to play. It's just I don't have any complaints about the game, but I also don't feel compelled to play it, and I think that's an okay spot for people to be in, because, you know, sometimes just metas don't click with people.
I know that you aren't wired in with social media on purpose, but you could not have given a more sage commentary on today's conversation if you tried and spent hours on it. So I applaud your introspection being so effective that it touches directly on the conversation in the greater community without you even needing to be aware of it.
I mean, I'm a bit aware of the Reddit conversation.
That's unfortunate.
But not like not super keyed in on it. So hopefully people can come to an understanding, but I also understand that that will never happen because it's social media and people are not reasonable on social media a lot of the time. Well, some people are not reasonable.
Attention is given to the extremes, right? Like the folks that live in the middle don't really get as much traction, so it's if you're on one end or the other, then you will polarize people's opinions, and those that agree with you will be noisy in their agreement, and those that disagree will be noisy in their disagreement. So such is the nature of social media. Edelweiss, how are you doing? How are you?
I'm doing all right. Been also not queuing that much. Sort of the opposite of ladder anxiety, sort of ladder despair, hopelessness. I don't know. That's a bit much. That's a bit exaggeration. Yeah. But I just mean there. Like once I hit a certain number, I'm sort of like, well, what's the point? We'll just wait until the reset and we'll get up to legend again. And then I won't have to look at this number that is in the 3 or 4Ks. I feel like once I hit that point, I have a lot less interest. I probably because I would have to grind super hard with something that's like tier 1 deck, and I don't feel like doing that right now, especially because I'm still going to hit some matchups that will feel unwinnable. And yeah, I don't know, just not really vibing with the current standard. I feel weird because on the one hand, I totally support the balance changes that were made, and I think it needed to happen. But where we've landed just hasn't clicked for me, same as Bott, which is sort of weird because I didn't expect that.
This is Scholomance too, right?
What's going on here? Edelweiss, we don't agree on stuff unless we
I know.
against Hat. Like, that's the only time.
Did Scholomance have this as well? I guess it did.
Scholomance had a crazy first 6 weeks. We played an insane amount. It felt like there was a new deck every day. Then they nerfed it 3 times, and by the end of the format, 3.5 months in, everyone was sick of it because there were only a couple key decks that were really good. Libram Paladin, Soul DH at the time. And the interesting from hand stuff got taken away because it was too powerful. You lost your... And also, Dark Lair got nerfed and it killed Zoo. Which happened again. This time.
Uh-huh.
Same thing. They nerfed things until Libram Paladin became the best deck, which we're close to. There are a lot of similarities. Oh, and Mage pissed people off, and then they nerfed it and they killed the class. I think a lot of people are hopeful that happens the next month. But the parallels are really similar. This is kind of the thing about... We talk about the love of 5-set metas a lot in the first 6 weeks. But with all 3 Alec Dawson 5-set metas with sets that start with letter S, they've been amazing for the first 6 weeks to 8 weeks or so. And then something happens to break them, or they get nerfed until they're not fun anymore. Because the interesting stuff is also the powerful stuff, and then it gets pulled back, and so you end up playing with a hybrid of the previous meta and the current meta that makes nobody happy. It's... With Saviors, we had Doom and the Dooms, which was an outlier in terms of what happened, but also it's relevant, right? We took a really great meta, and then it got way worse. With Skolo, it just kind of got nerfed so that variety was reduced with every nerf, because the things that were good in negative play pattern ways that got taken away. And so they needed to keep winnowing down the field, but what was left ended up with people not being super engaged towards the end. And now we are halfway through Stormwind, and it's not a bad meta by any means. There's a lot of diversity, a lot of different ways to play, but the discourse is about as negative as I can remember it being. Even though there are plenty of people that are enjoying it, because the people that aren't enjoying it are expressing that in a way where they're saying the things that are good right now should never happen again. And that is the part that's been really difficult of... It feels as though, not just in the current meta, it feels like for most of this year, and it's probably, latent effects from the past year and a half of real life stuff, that enjoying Hearthstone at times feels like defending a political position, where... you have to justify and explain and rationalize enjoying the game. At the same time, this is not me saying people that are having a bad time should feel like they're doing something wrong, that there's anything wrong with not enjoying the current meta. Like Bott, I think you said it really well. You didn't click with it, and that's cool. And I understand that there are really legitimate concerns about some of the play patterns. That's not going to be for everyone, and there are design choices they made that I hope in the future that they don't make card draw quite this efficient again, because I think it's just a little bit too much, and burn from hand is something they need to be really aware of. There are some elements of this meta that are over the line, tuning-wise. But the criticisms on design have been kind of exhausting in the past week or so, and so I hope there's some nuance to be found there as well.
Yeah, I would have to agree for sure. Because again, I'm not enjoying it, but I recognize that some people are enjoying things more now. I also kind of wasn't like super enjoying the part before the patch. There's different reasons as to why. And when I say not enjoying, I mean like not throwing myself at this game and devoting it all of my time. Like that's what it means for me to be not enjoying. I still log in and play and make sure I do my dailies like at a bare minimum. But it's felt a bit rock paper scissorsy to me. I really liked Rush Warrior, and that's not a thing I can do right now. that kind of warrior is gone. And it's been interesting to watch some attrition strategies work their way back in, and I think to some extent that has been good, but it added another element to the rock paper scissors-ness that's going on, right? The control decks are back, which means that not only is it you've got sort of aggro and combo killing each other, there's more than just quest shaman to deal with the aggro decks. So there's been some really frustrating matchups or like runs you can have where you're playing a deck and you hit your great matchup and you feel really good, and then you hit your bad matchup and it feels terrible, and you're like, why did I even try playing that? I have such a low percentage of winning, and it might not actually be that low, but it always feels really low. And I sort of hit a point where I said, hey, Diablo 2 Resurrected came out, and I loved that game growing up. That was like so much of my elementary school, well, like 5th and 6th grade, was playing Diablo 2, and I've been enjoying going back to it. I appreciate it every time I hit G and look what the old engine was like, and then look at the modern graphics, and I'm like, yes, this is why I haven't played this game in a long time. I do appreciate the new Code of Paint. It's totally worth it.
Code of Paint might be underselling it. It's a
okay. Yeah. It's way better. It's so
dramatic.
Cool. Updated cinematics. It's I get to enjoy this thing that I loved from my childhood in high definition. It's great.
You get to play it how you remember it looking, because that's really what the goal is that
that's true.
Your memory colors these things so much because it's suited to what it was like at the time, and then your memory stays high definition. But if you go back and play something that's rendered in 320 by 240 in 2021, it's not going to look very good. So their goal is to update it so that it looks like how you remember it looking back in the day when we were younger and looked at things differently in a very different world. Lower resolution monitors that were worse at anti-aliasing, like the edges were blurry, but it made it look better back in the day. They did some magic. They had some server launch problems. It's worth noting. First day was a little rough, and there were even some bugs in the first couple days. But it deserves mention that in the first day of New World, which is made by this company called Amazon, which is one of the two companies in the world best at cloud computing along with Google, they also had server issues, so it might not be something that's avoidable if the company that sells cloud computing to other companies also had launch issues. They fixed it by day 2. Diablo's mostly stable at this point, and I'm glad you've been having a good time. This is not Warcraft 3. This is not Warcraft 3 or 4. It's just a very different ballgame. Yeah.
So
They did a great job.
I was looking at playing Diablo 2 Resurrected, and then I looked at the price tag and kind of second guessed it. Would you say that price tag is worth? Because I grinded the crap out of Diablo 2 back in the day. I played that game so much and really, really enjoyed it, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be worth it to play the same game. And there she goes.
Oh no. I'm
Sorry.
Edelweiss now.
I'm working on getting a hardline internet so that does not happen. Are we back?
We are. We've
We
been
are.
here. Welcome back. You didn't stop recording, right?
Nope, I did not.
Good.
Cool.
All right. So, yeah, for me, I would say it was worth every penny. You know, it's about the price that I paid for the game when it came out. Or I don't know when I became aware of it. I don't know if it was when it came out. I was in 5th grade. I feel like this is a game that I've bought like 3 times because I lost the discs because there were so many discs, and then get it again. Or like I got the battle chest that had the expansion, so you know, make sure I had everything. And I wanted to be able to play with people, you know, with my brother. So this is a game that's very near and dear to my heart. And so, of course, nostalgia factor, and they did a great job remaking it. It's worth every penny to me. I would say if you were hoping for like a ton of quality of life updates, I think there are a few things that they really made nicer, but it's tough to walk the line of, you know, making quality of life updates and keeping it true to the old spirit. And I think they didn't want to cross that line. I think there's a couple of things they could have included, such as in Diablo 3, when you're playing with other people, you don't share loot. Like, you see your own drops so that you don't have to worry about splitting things. Diablo 2 does not work that way.
Nope, it doesn't.
It's
It
very much
really
fast
doesn't.
hands.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
I mean, that's so much of a part of the core experience that I think it's hard to take that away, but I also understand the desire of maybe don't introduce conflict or bring back conflict in 2021. Like, I get that idea, but you did not have Diablo 2 multiplayer without stuff like that, without fighting over loot
true.
or having some kind of really complex system that people then got dramatic about and argued about for quite some time after. Like, that was part of the ball game. Did WoW Classic change that?
wonder-
WoW Classic didn't change that either, right?
Uh,
Because I remember when we were playing at BlizzCon, our Tall Starter beaks got sniped. Like, that definitely happened.
I don't remember. I never played Classic. I mean, I played it at BlizzCon with you, but I started the game during Burning Crusade,
Yeah.
like back in the day. So, but I'm wondering if they fixed town PKs for hardcore.
Hmm.
I wonder if that was fixed or not.
I would think so. That seems
Yeah.
like definitely a thing they would have fixed.
Probably probably makes me less likely to play the game, believe it or not, because I was a toxic little kid. I'm telling you.
But
Oh no!
why?
Wait,
I was.
Oh, no.
I did not see this
I
twist coming.
Like, I hate to admit it, but man, killing people trying to get into hardcore was some of the most fun I've ever had playing the game.
All right, moving on. I didn't
Oh,
need to know
man.
this. Oh, Bott.
I should have maybe known that there was this griefer element that runs deep into your soul, but like, oh boy, that was.
I mean, for somebody who enjoys playing original Quest Rogue as much as I did, you had to see it coming.
but like,
You had to see it coming.
at least original Quest Rogue, you were trying to win your game, and also make them unhappy. Killing people in town doesn't do anything to make your game better. It just deletes their character. You don't get anything for it, right? You don't.
Yeah, but they're like level 8 or whatever. It takes them 30 minutes.
Oh,
It's not like we were.
man.
It's not like we were killing like super high level players or whatever. Just little lobies. I don't know. I'd like to say I'm older and wiser and wouldn't do that again to people.
But
This is why, folks, you make an online character and play with your friends. You don't need to go in public lobbies. You play with friends. A good friend will make a new character to level with you instead of just being like, let me play my character 30 levels over you, it'll be fine. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I honestly, I haven't gone in any public lobbies, even though I used to all the time as a kid. I don't feel like dealing with it. I don't know.
I didn't
Not
even
really sure
realize
why.
there was like a private lobby meta back in the day.
That's because they knew
I
that
mean,
you
it was
were a
so much
player killer.
harder.
They wouldn't invite you.
No,
Because you were murderous.
That's not okay. That's not the case. For one, and for two, like coordination online was significantly reduced back in the day. So I would imagine it was much harder to put together stuff like that. But now we have like Discords and all kinds of crazy stuff to be able to co-op and do all that kind of thing. So.
Well, back in the day, we had this thing where you would all go over to your friend's house, and that was how you had to do it. Like, that was the original Discord, is that, like, you were just physically around those people. So anyways, now that we've learned a lot about Botticus that we can't unlearn, for me, Life and Ladder, so I have appreciated the high legend experience. I have cratered pretty hard out of top 50 and really out of top 200. I had a bad run over the past day and a half or so that correlated with, real life throwing me some curveballs that I wasn't anticipating. Been kind of a crappy week, and so like I was playing to find something to distract myself with, and as we've discussed repeatedly, not a good idea. But I wasn't pushing for a finish. I was going to see what happened, then I saw what happened. And in the past, I've said that I don't like the grind because of how much effort and energy you have to put into it. And in reality, I recognize it's been valuable to learn and be a part of that experience. It's made me a better player. Playing at that level helps me grow my game. The part that I don't like is the losing. And, I mean, a lot of people don't like losing, but anytime you have any kind of goal set by a rank, it sucks to get further away from it. And there are certain levels of the ladder where you can have a goal that doesn't correlate to rank. I think most of them, 11x is kind of rank correlated, but you can just like get comfortable playing at that level, whatever. It's kind of hard to say top 50, but I don't care about the rank because it's like it is defined by the number. And so I don't like what caring about the number feels like. I like playing at that level. I like feeling like I'm good enough to play at that level. But I don't like caring about the number and what it makes me feel like and how much I end up playing at times where I probably shouldn't, or when I keep queuing and queuing and queuing. It's been useful, but it ends up being a lot of games with the same decks. It ends up being kind of samey, and the variance stands out a lot more. Like when something really good or really bad happens, it's just more obvious because the normal games just kind of blend together. And you just run it back. You see a lot of the same people. They know what you're playing. You know what they're playing. Really, really different from the normal ladder experience. So I'm glad I got to be a part of it. I intend to keep playing as well as I have been playing, but I won't have a leaderboard finish this month. And I wouldn't mind having that as a regular thing that I do, but I also would not be doing it for anyone. I'm not pushing for Master Tour quals, and I was close to a ladder finish this month, and then I'm not anymore. So, like, that's just kind of how it goes. So, gonna go back to learning some decks. Got some good experience with Aggro Taunt Druid. We'll talk about Aggro Taunt Druid for Decksplanations. I actually think the deck is... I think that part of the thing that we talked about how the control decks are rising up, I actually think a big part of it is how Aggro Taunt Druid is so good against other aggressive decks that it ends up limiting the format so the combo decks get more time. And I think it's actually kind of like how when they wanted to make Jade Druid worse, we're going way back in the day, way back. When they wanted to make Jade Druid worse, they nerfed Fiery War Axe, because the only aggro deck you could play was Pirate Warrior, and when you killed Pirate Warrior, you could play other stuff that was better against the Druid, but couldn't beat old Pirate Warrior. As long as Razormane Battleguard is happening, playing Face Hunter or Shadow Priest feels like a mistake, and as long as that's the case, then your Garrote Rogues and Quest Mages have a lot more time, and as long as they have time, then you're going to see them a lot more, as well as we're at the point where Taunt Druid doesn't have a lot of burn from hand, really any, without Park Panther. And that means that you can slow the game down on board, and so we're once again at the point where Libram Paladin is really, really strong. And while I think that the philosophy of nerf until Libram Paladin is one of the best decks to indicate format health is not necessarily a bad one, those cards have been around since Ashes. Kind of bored of Libram of Hope ending up being format defining because they nerf everything that's better than it. Not saying that it's wrong as far as overall power level, but in terms of like specific cards that end up being good, it's I'm all set. We can close the book on that one. Huh? Do you get it? Because Librams are books?
A lot of big Divine Shields, and they close the book on you because that weapon ends a lot of games.
Yeah. I mean, we know what Libram Paladin does. It's got some new toys now. You don't need them, like you don't need to play City Tax, but you can. You don't need to play Secrets, but you can. There's a lot of different ways to play it. It's more interesting than I think it has been in the past, and it's a new coat of paint. It's different. The games can go longer on Standard now. But I think if I'm looking at the perceived rise of combo and from hand decks, a lot of it is that aggro is kind of limited in what it can do because the best aggro deck is really good against other aggro. And when that's the case, then it kind of narrows the field of things that challenge the slower decks in a way that's really targetable. So, we'll talk about it more in the rest of the show. But we kind of wanted to open with a lot of thoughts and feelings because that's what this week in Hearthstone's been about. And I imagine until October 12th that the only thing that we're going to have to talk about in Hearthstone is thoughts and feelings along with random tweets because the team is hard at work with Mercenaries, and that is 12 days away. It's almost here. So
excited.
We'll see what happens. Why don't we jump into the news? We've got a little bit here.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right. So in news this week, we have another podcast that had a interesting little interview with the one and only Alec Dawson. And we happen to have somebody on this podcast who was also on that podcast because he hosts it, and that would be Mr. Ridiculous Hat. So, Hat, why don't you kind of give us a breakdown of kind of what was talked about, and we can maybe expand on it a little bit here in the news section for us this week.
Yeah, so I recognize it's a little weird to link my own podcast as a news item, but I did it on the Angry Chicken. I'll do it here too. We talked to Alec, and he is the lead final designer, so it seems like the sort of conversation that's worth highlighting. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, I strongly recommend going over there. The first half hour is the interview. It's only 30 minutes long, and we talk about the main topics are control decks and game length, quest lines, and matchup polarity. If you have been playing in this meta and paying attention to anybody talking about it, those are the things that always come up. So, basically, the short version. Control decks, they're not dead. And there is kind of the thing about the word control is that what defines a control deck is also kind of like a political position, that different people all mean different things when they say it, and it is hard to reach consensus on what is and isn't control, or what will make people happy or what won't. Personally, I'll dovetail here a little bit. I'll branch off. A lot of the concerns that I hear when people talk about aggro or combo, or people talk about linear combo decks or the quest lines or whatever, I hear that, as we've mentioned before, hear that games are too short, and that if I don't do the best thing and try and kill my opponent actively as quickly as possible, then I don't get a chance to sit at the table. And a lot of this is coming from content creators, because there are two ways to make constructed Hearthstone content. One, compete for rank 1 legend, or like be a Grandmaster or whatever. Two, play decks that aren't very good for fun. Those are kind of the ways to do it. Because you look at a lot of the big names in Hearthstone content creation, your Regis Kilbins, your Dexters, your people that make videos, they aren't playing meta stuff because they're being creative and expressing themselves and having fun and whatever. And this has been, I think, the worst meta of all time to do that. Edelweiss, you usually do that in your stream, right?
Yeah, no, I can confirm that it certainly at least feels like it is the worst time to do that. Funky Monkey seems to do okay. But...
yeah. I mean, you can push it, but it has never felt more punishing to be a creative deck builder than before, because what's good in the format is very well defined. It is drawing cards, playing really efficient stuff, and killing your opponent. And there are ways to slow the game down, but not really effective ones to the point where you can play Elwyn Boar and win games for the video. So at the same time, talk to Alec. Control is not dead. It's not in play as much as it could be, but he emphasized they do not want endurance attrition control to be the way that you play Control. Didn't give a time frame, didn't say forever or right now, just said that we want Control to be something where you play Haymakers, your Troublemakers and Rattlegores, for example, as opposed to simply having more removal than your opponent has threats and waiting it out. That was made very clear. There are some newer style Control decks in the future that they're planning on setting up. He alluded to those. Quest lines will have some advantage over Control, but he alluded to there could be some tech cards that help there. There could be Control decks that win in a different way that are able to ignore the quest lines. We'll see where they go. Lord knows, they got a mini set, another set, and then a mini set after that for the rest of this year. So we'll get some new tools. And something that really stood out about their balance philosophy and Control decks and game length, that if they want to push a card, what they've done lately in design, and they recognize this, is that they have said, you want more cards to be good? All right, make it a mana cheaper and streamline the body, tune down the body a little bit. And you end up with powerful effects on cards that, he didn't mention this, but the card I think of is like Field Contact. If you want Field Contact to be good, you make it cost 3 and make it a 3/2, as opposed to a 4 mana 4/3 or 5 mana 5/4 or whatever. And you end up with a lot of cards that are fighting on the efficiency axis, and there just aren't that many big cards in play. So he explicitly said the team is really aware of this, that the games are still a little too fast and cards are still a little too cheap, and that they want people to play cool 6 to 10 mana cards in the future, and they're going to try and find a way to make that happen. The references that we made in the show was like, Old Gods, for example, aren't seeing any play at all right now, and that they really want to see, bigger effects in play. And they're aware that as of right now, a lot of things are just too efficient and costs are too low, and that the meta's a little faster than they want it to be. Not way out of line from what they envisioned, but a little faster than they want it to be, and things are a little too efficient. So pause there for thoughts.
So I forget if I mentioned this last week at all, but someone had done this poll on when people feel like the game should end. And this person was very much in the camp of turn 8. And there were a lot of folks that said turn 12. That was the highest on the poll, was turn 12. And this was for average game length in terms of turns. And I commented that I feel like people may have been thinking of what they wanted as the mode, meaning like most occurring rather than the average, because an average means some of them are going shorter than that and some of them are going way longer than that. I kind of get the idea that you want to have an opportunity to play your big 10 mana card, and I think that's cool. But yeah, I kind of, with Alec, you don't necessarily want the game lasting too much longer than that, because, time is valuable and people want to be able to move on to other things. And so this gets into the messy discussion of, well, what then is control? And I think listening to that interview, Zacho made an excellent comment that was, you'll sometimes have control decks that are very attrition focused, and then they get a win condition. And some people are like, well, it's not a control deck anymore because you play this thing that actually like wins the game. And it's like, well, what? Hang on. Can't it be a controlling strategy, like even with these haymakers, as Alec described, that end the game? And Rattlegore is a perfect example. It can be dealt with, but with fewer things that transform right now, Rattlegore is a really big threat that's gonna end the game pretty quickly. If you don't either kill them or, figure out some way to deal with it. The only ways right now are mostly in Shaman. You can like maybe get a Devolving Missiles off a Wand Thief as Rogue, but it's basically like Shaman's the number one, and then Mage.
Yeah.
And Priest.
Mage just freezes it over and over and over again.
Yeah, or kills the warrior. Mage also just kills the warrior sometimes.
Yeah. But Mage's solution is definitely freeze it, kill the warrior. Yeah. So it's a weird spot we're in. I like that we are getting win conditions for control. I think that's good. I probably have even a little different viewpoint of what that means. I have built a version of the Quest Warlock that the goal is to remove all their things, and then you win because they take your fatigue, right? You are still drawing and playing things, but it's very like removal heavy. That's probably even too much attrition for what they're saying, even though you get to the end and they take your fatigue. So you technically have this inevitability win condition. That's probably a little more attrition-y than they have in mind.
And they nerfed that deck too by, like, that was a Rod Demon Seed deck, and they nerfed both those things. Fatigue Warlock's kind of gone now.
Well, no, not the one I made. Was just, it had Twisting Nethers, it had the 6-drop, and it was really just remove everything. It was made to beat Paladin. That's what it was.
Yeah. And like the Rod Matron Hand deck from before the nerf also did just fine against Paladin, because your deck was entirely removal spells and draw. Like, it was okay at that, and then you would kill people by going Tams in hand, and they would take 1 billion. Like, just infinity damage. As I saw that poll too. Turn 12, I don't know if there's an understanding of what an average turn 12 environment would look like. Because, well, that's this. I said in the Angry Chicken, the people that disagree with that poll were busy playing games of Hearthstone. And, like, because if you like this format, you're just going to queue up games of Hearthstone. But turn 12 just means Rise of Shadows, boom, Control Warrior. Like, that's what that means. That's turn 12, average. Is that you get to Omega Devastator Ziliax and the game keeps going. So, like, if people are saying I want games to go longer, understood. I get it. The devs say the same thing. Turn 12 average is not that. It's not that. It's not a thing. So, yeah, Bott, I see that you agree aggressively with the idea of, like...
Oh, yeah. The only other one I could even think that would probably come close to that would be, like, Taunt, like Wall Priest.
Yep. Or Jade Idol Mirrors. Yeah, Jade Idol Mirrors would absolutely do it. I mean, Turtle Mage sometimes could go that long, but, that wasn't around very long.
But yeah, we haven't had many... Like, turn 7 to 8, I think, has been the average. If you took all averages of all Hearthstone, I would probably assume it comes down to around average of 8.
Yeah, 8 or 9, I think. Somewhere in that range. And Ergopad in chat raises a good point. This was an informal Reddit poll. I doubt this is truly representative of the player base as a whole, and also there just weren't that many answers to give on the poll. I don't think that a person, like, if you went up to them and said turn 12 and then talked to them about it, that's where most people would land as far as where they want every game to be. Some games, sure. But every game, I don't think so. Yeah. Next topic was quest lines. How the thing that they like the most about quest lines, and quests in general as a mechanic, why they're so popular and why they're so nice for the design team, is that you kind of make a deck with one card, and then the rest of your set can be different cards. Like, you can put in the Priest quest and make Shadow Priest. You can put in the Hunter quest and then make Rat Hunter. I understand that those examples may not see as much play right now, but you're kind of using one card to build an entire new strategy a lot of the time. And in addition, they have a lot of opportunity to nerf them, because you can nerf so many different numbers in all 3 phases of the quest. You look at the Demon Seed. Handlock is one of the best decks in the format, despite so much nerfing being done. Like, Rod was crazy and gross. But then also, there were nerfs that were done to the Demon Seed of 6 and 7 to 8 and 8 for the first 2 steps. Deck is still just fine. Deck is still good. And that they have more opportunity to nerf it, but I don't think that means that it is innately a problematic card and that they tried to kill it. It means that they wanted to get a little bit worse, and it did get a little bit worse. Just the rest of the format got slower around it, and the best aggro deck really has trouble with Soul Rend into Taunt gain 6. So it's entirely possible for them to do a lot to make the quest lines more fair and balanced. And also, remember, Iksar's talked about a mass nerf. We've mentioned earlier today, a couple times, that the cards are really efficient in Standard, and there will be a point where it's kind of hard to envision where they'll go from here. I don't think that this will be the jumping off point that they have next year, because I imagine there will be some substantial changes to cards as they rotate in the last patch before the big set next April. That'd be my guess. And they were talking about doing some pre-release nerfs, in particular in Canterslow and Il'gynoth. But in their mind, Hearthstone is a game of discovery, and removing options from players before they get the chance to play them seems like something that's at odds with what they want the early expansion experience to be, especially when they're planning these balance patches a week and a half to 2 weeks in. That if they know about some things being on the line and they know it's going to be powerful, but they're planning a quick patch, why not let players try them? There were some things they missed, and in particular, he did mention Stealer Warlock was something that he wished they had caught, and it was not intended. And when he was asked what is the one thing that you would have done differently from Stormwind, he said we would have caught that beforehand, that Stealer would have not existed. I think it's important to note that that was clearly unintended, and that sort of thing happens all the time. I doubt they wanted 2-mana deck of Lunacy to define the format in the first 2 weeks of Barrens either, but, such is the nature of these things. And that a lot of the negative feedback that they've gotten is the inevitability that some of the questlines can bring, and in particular, he mentioned Mage, Warlock, and Shaman. Shaman has turned out to not really be a huge problem right now, but Mage and Warlock are still visible, and I think Mage is the one that probably limits people the most, even though Warlock is a better deck. And they've slowed them down, but, as we mentioned, format's not still a little bit faster than they want right now, and that's something that they're aware of. Thoughts?
So I've been a pretty big proponent of quest lines. I kind of always love all the quest lines, whether it be some of these super broken ones all the way down to the ones that are not very good, except for Quest Druid. Still hate that one. But I do feel like I feel like they're generally a good addition to Hearthstone and bring a lot of excitement. I do feel like the way that it generally plays out can also lead to a good bit of staleness because of the repetitive nature of how a lot of the games play out. So, like, I don't know. It's hard because I really want them to keep making quests, because I think it's some of the most enjoyable gameplay when you're first playing it, and some of the quests that are really good, keep playing them for a while longer. But I think it also leads to burnout a lot more than maybe some other variations. But at the same time, I also kind of think that in general, the good Hearthstone decks all play out similarly. Like,
yeah,
good Hearthstone decks generally will always play out like the same.
Their goal is to do the same thing every time, right? Like, you can have options. You can have different ways of getting options. And also there is the RNG and variance element that can change from game to game. But the way you win in Hearthstone is by finding a really good strategy, then doing that every game, and then your opponent dies. And, like, maybe it's different, like, do I cube my Doomguard or my Voidlord? But you're still cubing a big demon that you recruited and then killing your opponent, or something like that. The quests are more visible because they've talked about how the thing at the beginning of the game and the thing at the end of the game are really visible, and the quest is both. But, like, there are, historically in Hearthstone, the way that you win is with consistency.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear that by making these sort of single card build-arounds, they get this space to put cards towards other decks. But I think what we've basically seen is that classes where the quest lines are successful, there aren't really other decks going on. I think the one exception is Rogue. You have Quest Rogue and you have Garrote Rogue. But for the most part, Warlocks have the Quest right now. Mages are Quest. We tried Wildfire for a little while after the balance changes. It wasn't really happening. And perhaps they'll provide more support so it becomes more of a decision. But at least right now, it doesn't feel like those extra cards have really done much to open up other strategies besides the Quest for the decks where the Quest is viable.
Demon Hunter? Demon Hunter is DRDH and fell.
Yeah, I don't see too much Death Rattle DH, but that's probably just because people are a little bored of it.
Yeah, it's decent. It's good against Mage. Shaman kind of like has Elemental and regular. Warrior is just being explored. We're seeing some of it.
Yeah, that's true.
But there are... Oh, and Hunter. Hunter has Face and Quest, which is like a different face. It plays differently, but like...
Yeah.
I don't know. There are a couple like reasonable and interesting quest decks that are happening. It's not all of them are hits. And a lot of the time, like, Mage is, again, the poster child here for the problem because there was no other Mage deck, and so it just took a decent, not even as good as people thought, and then made it better, and it still remained popular, even though, again, the number is, like, it's not, the win rate is not really there in the same way.
Yeah, I guess it was a little harsh for me to say, but it sort of feels like, at least in terms of what I've been seeing, it's sort of either, the Quest deck is dominant or the other deck is dominant. They're not on like even footing in terms of play rate, but
yeah, it's true. Like it's you're not wrong, and I think that there's opportunity there, but also the thing that they designed Quest Hunter to do was so they could make room for Rat Hunter, and I think that we can agree that didn't happen. And I don't know, like Shadow Priest happened until it didn't. And Quest Priest, I guess, technically exists. I mean, you were playing it a lot a week ago, and then you stopped because it was Quest Priest.
That was mostly to tutor for tech cards, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the 6-set meta is going to be really explosive and interesting to witness, because there are a few of these quest lines where it does feel like even one more card that goes with its strategy could just like totally put it on the map. Like if Shaman has another Overload card that is value oriented, it would be absurd. If Quest Hunter gets another efficient damage spell, particularly one that can go face, that could be pretty gross. I think there's a lot of stuff that's sort of just on the edge. And then you'll get, some people even more complaining about the quests. So I think it's one of those card designs that is just a little bit, honestly, polarizing in terms of popularity. I know there are some people who say they hate quest lines because they don't want to build around, right? They think that part of Hearthstone, or part of card games, I guess, is deck building. And to have something that is just this cookie cutter build around, they really don't like. I think that's silly because some people really need that because not everyone has to be a deck builder. There's a whole lot to the game besides building decks. But there are certainly people who feel that way.
it is... They've talked about how at the beginning of the game and the end of the game, the cards you see at the opening and closing are the ones that are most memorable. And making a design that does both those things is really playing with fire. And the way that they've addressed this in the past, well, quests before this expansion were one of two things. Unplayable after the set they were released in, and sometimes during, or the caverns below. Those were what you could do. And unfortunately, Quest Mage, French Toast brought this up in chat, and I agree, Quest Mage and Quest Rogue kind of have the same situation going on here, where, original Quest Rogue, where the way to beat it is to put them on the clock, and there is not really any other effective way to interact. Yes, you can do like 4-post and Ogremancer, but that just puts them on a clock in a very specific way. And if you don't do that, they're only going to interact with your stuff if it's going to kill them, and they're going to just try and slow it down so they can kill you. And they have that, a few of the quests are like that, and I don't think this is a quest-specific problem, because, let me tell you, Garrote Rogue does not feel better to play against, and it does the exact same thing, and it's not because of the quest. But the quests are a great flag bearer for this problem, and in particular, again, I feel like so much of this comes down to Mage being this really visible thing, this really visible representation of the things that people don't like with the format, but it's not because it has a quest, it's because the deck is too good at doing a specific thing that pisses people off.
And it's interesting to talk about Mage as well, because yeah, the quest is just +3 spell damage. That's probably fine. It's Ignite is why they don't run out of stuff. Because if they ran out of burn, then it's very achievable to sort of out armor or have some kind of protection. That would mostly be a warrior thing, I guess, to some extent a druid thing. But or if they use some burn, then maybe you can heal in between. But Ignite, I have a weird relationship to, because I like the card. I like the idea of a spell damage mage that has minions and is not the quest. Being able to take advantage of something like Ignite, it's a cool thing, using the Fire Chandler or whatever to, just draw Ignites from your deck once you don't have fire sales or these other things. But so long as Ignite does what it does in terms of shuffling back in, Mage doesn't run out of burn. So, and there's a couple ways to address that. One is for Ignite to not work that way. Or in which case it's just a totally different card. That would be a full rework. Another is for card draw to be less efficient. And right now, Mage has access to Cram Session that is, assuming you don't have to use it before the quest, 2 mana, draw 4. And then Refreshing Springwater, which is generally 1 mana, draw 2.
Or 0. Or 0 mana,
Yeah,
draw 2.
or 0. Yeah, or gain 1. But yeah, and then if you really want to go for it, you can include Gadgets and Auctioneer. But it's just a ton of card draw. AI being the worst at 3 mana draw 2. And that still helps some of the time. Sometimes you're just cycling a fire sale so that you draw that next Ignite. Your deck is just gone, and you go Ignite, trade fire sale, pick up the Ignite again. It's just so easy to get the Ignite back that it effectively means they have infinite damage. And there's not typically a way to burn spells. Warlock is the only one capable of doing that. And yeah, there are other reasons that matchup is not great for the Warlock.
Yeah.
And also, if it's kind of like, if that ever became a popular thing to do, the Mage could play around it very easily.
Yeah.
It's not
it's the same as Mutinous as a counter to the quest lines. If Mutinous ever really becomes meta, then you can typically play around it pretty easily by just not completing quest until you can play at the same turn.
And it's also worth emphasizing, for those of you shouting at your radios, Quest Mage also isn't that much of an outlier by a win rate, and there are 14 or 15 decks that are better than it. But it's popular, and what it does is it suppresses certain strategies from existing. If it had a lower play rate in the same current play pattern, it would probably be fine. But because it is the most popular deck on ladder at basically all levels of play except for top 1k and up, then it is a defining part of many people's experiences. And trying stuff off the beaten path, or trying the slower decks they buffed, like your Warriors, your Libram Paladins, or whatever, you just get blown up by Mage. You just die to fireballs. So there's a lot that the dev team has to deal with here, and I don't envy them even a little bit, because this is a popular deck that people like to play. It's inexpensive. It's been around for a while, and it's not a win rate outlier. And also, it is by far the focus of the most discourse in the format, and currently it is the flag bearer for the things that people who don't like Stormwind don't like about Stormwind. And I don't really know what the correct answer is here, but it's important, I think, for us to recognize people with varying levels of engagement with the meta. I'm super about it. Edelweiss somewhat, Botticus not feeling at the moment, that all of us kind of recognize that the deck is not problematic in terms of winning too much, but maybe the play pattern isn't something that's healthy to stick around forever. I would guess that it should not survive this expansion. Maybe make it to the mini set, but I think that if this is still a relevant strategy to play in week 1 of the next expansion, that would be a mistake. I think that shouldn't be a thing that is allowed to happen. There have been too many mage nerfs this year, and too many times when it's come back in such a major way that the story has to change.
It's kind of crazy too, because you have to think that if it's the only time, well, not the only, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but if a deck is really popular and does not have a high win rate, that's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because we see how metas evolve, and people play what's good, generally. Like, people will play some off-meta stuff, but for the most part, people play what's good. So if people are playing a deck that is technically, I mean, I don't want to say it's not good, but it's not the best deck in the format, and people are constantly playing it, it must be because it's enjoyable to play, I would assume.
Yeah.
It's a very one-sided enjoyable.
Yeah.
It is super powerful to have that feeling of just like, okay, I've got my spell damage, and then I play the Ignite, and then I draw cards, and then I play the Ignite again, and I draw cards. And someone mentioned a change of, oh, maybe Ignite could shuffle at the end of the turn. And on the one hand, I think, oh, that's really interesting to sort of stop the cycle, but still have that inevitability there. I also think that kills the deck. And that kills sort of the fantasy that is this mage of casting a bunch of spells. And I think the intent is clear of having maybe a Fire Chandler that draws Ignite repeatedly. But that's not how we're drawing Ignite repeatedly.
Yeah. It's and it's tied pretty closely to a design from WoW. You could make it not scale spell damage at all, but the thing in WoW gets bigger as you keep casting it, and it's kind of tough to not have that. So it probably ends up just being a cost increase. I mean, you can cost that card to the point where, like, it's not good enough. You can make that card a 4-mana card, and then it is a much worse card.
That's true.
Yeah. There are enough numbers for them to move, and I think it's probably appropriate for them to move. So, the last topic that we covered in this interview was polarizing matchups, where the level of polarity that they view as okay is when you don't go into a matchup, see the other portrait, and feel like conceding. Because that is the behavior that they want to avoid. They want you to feel like you have a chance. Polarity is not the be-all, end-all for balance adjustments. They don't go for 50-50 matchups. Like, they don't want the entire meta being 50-50 matchups because that's not enjoyable, and it removes a lot of interesting things. And they just want to make it so that you play out the games and feel like you have some kind of chance, even if you know you're unfavored. So, tech cards can help counter polarizing matchups, and right now, Alec actually believes tech cards are at the low end right now and that you can expect more in the future, and they don't have to be things like Kobold Sticky Fingers. We're talking about your Neophytes and Ogremancers, that sort of thing. The softer responses to spells or minions or whatever. But you're not going to see Galaka Crawlers or Sticky Fingers, that sort of thing. That level of, if you draw it, you win the game, and if you don't, then they win the game. Something like that. So, something that they're keeping an eye on. And, we kind of touched on the polarity thing. I think the quest lines and the control deck conversation covers it pretty well. I definitely recommend going to listen back to that interview. Alec is very well spoken. He's fun, and it was a good time.
Well, where there was a pretty good example of some tech cards. Perhaps not the way we would recommend playing them, but something interesting happened in tournaments this week, Hat.
We'll talk about that for sure, but Monsanto's deck lists I took a screenshot. We will display them. So this is your warning, visual listeners, visual watchers. Be aware that you're going to see some gory deck lists with some over-teched, might be an understatement. So yeah, what else we got, Bodigus?
Yeah, so just a little Twitter note from Iksar about patch timing, and this I believe was in response to Kibler's post, right?
Yes, this was deep into the thread, but there were some specifics about the nature of the mini set timing and Mercenaries.
Yeah, so he says, for the sake of clarity, delaying the mini set wasn't a strategic choice, but rather something that was necessary due to the work involved with merging all of the mini set code into a totally different patch. We actually did try to put the mini set into the same patch. Work just wasn't realistic to finish it in time to make it work. So basically, it wasn't because everybody's working on Mercenaries, it's because coding both of those and putting it all into one patch is kind of bonkers.
Yeah. The design team... Hold on. The design teams are different, but the engineering team that makes Hearthstone into the thing that you play is the same. So you have to be aware that it's not like that all the people that work on Standard just drop what they were doing, went over to do Mercs. It's not what happened. The designers are still designing. And this was in a thread with Kibler and a bunch of other people, and Iksar was responding, and made it clear that the teams are different. And what I personally picked up from that was that if they need to balance things, then they can balance things, right? Like, if there is a question of making balance changes, that it is not because all the balance designers are overworking on Mercs that we won't see changes. They're different teams. But the reason that the mini set got pushed back was because of the tech. It's because they could not get the tech going to put all the stuff out at the same time for the engineers to be sane and actually get it done. So, just wanted to make sure that we shared this with everyone, that it's the reason for the delay was one where the limiting factor was the engineering and the deployment, as opposed to the design. And apparently the mini set is done already, and has long since been done, and is ready to go. They just couldn't get it in the client yet. And that, I'm not surprised. We kind of talked about that last week, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Designs are typically done way in advance. It was unusual that they were still talking about the Demon Hunter hero power like pretty close up until Ashes coming out. They generally work several sets ahead.
My understanding is that it was described by both journalists and the people working on it at the time as crazy. That is my understanding, is that it was described as crazy. And also, sure, makes a lot of sense as to how Demon Hunter got released in the sense that it did. They just, they did more than they had time for, and the design was too close to release for it to be for the numbers to be correct.
Yep. And lastly, for news, if you have been waiting for some skins to come out that were maybe pre-release or pre-bundle skins that you didn't get but want a chance to get now. Now is your chance to get King Rastakhan or Elise Starseeker. So if you need either of these portraits to add to your collection, you should be able to buy them in the store now for $15 US. And I'm sure there are plenty more skins to be re-released if you are looking for them.
Yep.
And that's pretty much it for news.
Tournament time? Let's go.
Tournament time.
It's the grand tournament!
We're just going to jump right ahead to Monsanto's lineup. I put it on the screen here if you're watching. What is happening here? There are 8 Rustrot Vipers, 8 Acidic Swamp Oozes. There's some numbers of Frozen Shadow Weavers. I forgot that card was still in Standard. 8 Ogre Mancers. A lot going on here. So, jump ahead a little bit here. Monsanto was locked for first place, or nearly locked for first place. I believe there's a technical possibility to get second. But he said, the only thing that mattered to me this weekend was to target Dreadeye, who plays a lot of Weapon Rogue. That's their pet deck, so I brought something that would beat it. I didn't have a lot of time to test because he was working on the Classic event and all that, and he was locked for playoffs and near locked for first place. So, he brought some untested strategies, and well, he went 0-2. Didn't work out all that well. But it was not a violation of competitive integrity. It was a bad choice at hard targeting. These decks are bad. Really, really bad.
Are these decks?
All right, that's a good point. These piles of cards are really terrible.
I looked at them and I was like, interesting. All right, you can see what the texts are trying to do. And I'm like, now, what got removed for the win condition? Okay, that seems questionable.
Yep. There were some fire tweets about this, too. Soddle said he tried to paste Divine Favor Aggro Paladin outside of Classic, and this is what came out. Persia, who is a well-known duels player, says Monsanto is playing Meek Mastery in GMs, which I think is pretty funny. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
There is, yeah. Also, by the way, this lineup, 4 decks, 4 King Muklas. Bananas.
First.
Yes, exactly. Old school coin concede memes. So, otherwise, in the tournament section here, we've got some stuff going on. So the Gamebattles Tour, we had a few people in our Discord that talked about playing in it after we talked about it last week, including shout out to Jesse B, who played in the $1,000 Australia-New Zealand one and got second place. Congratulations, Jesse B. Well done. Apparently, it was really, really fun, of course. And let me find this. So Jesse B said that for a player who's never competed in anything like Hearthstone, like a Hearthstone tournament before, it was a blast. I was able to feel like what it was. I was able to feel what it was like to play in a competitive setting. There were some real nail-biter series, like one that came down to a Game 3 Perfect Lethal. The match was also against an opponent I had built up a friendly rivalry with after losing to him earlier that morning in the $100 tournament. If anyone is interested in trying their hand at competitive HS, despite the weird lack of format, this is a great opportunity to do so. Jesse, thank you for sharing that with us. Also, BW Wooster, I know, mentioned playing in it. Did quite well. I mean, Donkey played in the EU $1,000 one last week, and KP was the one that brought it to my attention. A lot of people are trying this out. And and I think Suzanne B99 on Twitter also told me that they had a good time. There are quite a few folks that are playing in this and just enjoying themselves. So definitely recommend checking it out. There was also a big streamed tournament this week, but not the format you're thinking. A classic tournament where Admirable and Kibler went to a studio and cast it in person. Edelweiss, I know you watched some of this.
It was so cool. It was such a throwback. Oh my god, I watched Savage Roar end the game. Force Roar, sorry. Force of Nature, Savage Roar. You remember that card that used to cost 6 and make 3 2/2 treants with charge that died at the end of the turn? Because that was okay. There was more charge then, but any charge then?
There was a lot of charge then. Classic Hearthstone was, a lot of it was about dying from 20. Like, there was a lot of dying from 20 that just kind of was a thing that happened there. It came up a lot. So, like, and Midrange Druid, the thing about Midrange Druid is that you would just 5-mana 4/4 charge and hit face a lot, and you would kill people with swipes and so on and so forth. So it wasn't just the Force Roar, but Force Roar was nice and very visible, and one of the original combos in the game. Yeah. So there were some old school names there. Tides of Time, Hyped, and Tare were all there that were playing. Just Saiyan and Frozen, who don't really play in a lot of tournaments outside of GM anymore. Well, Just Saiyan, not even GM anymore, but they came back and played a bunch. A lot of fun. Unsurprisingly, Monsanto, Language Hacker, and Trump SC won, and apparently to decide who got to take home the trophy, Monsanto and Language Hacker played a best-of-3 zoo mirror match as nature intended. So really enjoyed that. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. There was apparently, I didn't see this moment, but Chad is saying there was a funny moment where Tare mistook Firelands Malfurion for Garrosh and apparently threw his team's finals. I don't know what happened. I didn't see that, but that sounds pretty amazing. I have to look that up. Yeah. Also, Hearthstone Worlds is coming December 18th. Not too far. We've got our first 4 competitors, Nalgadon, Possessi, Frenetic, and KZG Xiaobai are all qualified already, assuming that any of the GMs don't relegate out, they keep their spots, and then we're hoping to get 4 more players crowned for playoffs starting next weekend. So we should have awareness to who is going to make up the Worlds roster pretty soon. In addition, we have our first round of relegations. Kayla's Luna, Boston, and Blitzchung were relegated from Grandmasters. Kayla's Luna probably bouncing back in with their results this year. Boston, probably not. Wrote a tweet longer about it. And Blitzchung, as we all know, announced that they were retiring no matter what happened this season, so them being relegated here is not a huge surprise. More relegation is coming. There will be a few more people from each region. And the fight for playoffs continues this upcoming weekend. As far as qualifiers go, last week, first round of 21.3 post-patch qualifiers. The best performing deck, Libram Paladin, and the second best deck, Handlock. Phase Hunter, Death Rattle Demon Hunter, and Hand Buff Paladin not far behind. Control Warrior was Trap, at least in the builds earlier on. And Quest Mage was either banned or targeted because it had the lowest win rate with the highest sample size. Quest Mage by far the biggest ban. 9 out of 10 classes won a qualifier, though only 1 mage, but no priest at all. Honestly, the meta was all over the place. Everything had some representation. There weren't really any clear trends to see, especially as the weekend progressed. Finally, we've got Ladder, and the latest VS report came out, and there's a lot here. I'm going to put this up on the screen now. The meta at Legend rank, not top 1000 Legend, overall Legend, the tier list, there are 7 Tier 1 decks, 7 Tier 2 decks, 5 Tier 3, 5 Tier 4. Tier 1 is above 52%. Tier 2 is above 50%. And there are 14 decks that qualify. Should be noted that at this rank, Contact Rogue, Garrote Rogue is not in the Tier 2 or up list. If you go to top 1000 Legend, the deck performs, the win rate goes up by 7.5%, which is unbelievable as far as skill cap goes. Because it is very, very rare for a deck to really be oppressive in the hands of high-skilled players and not in the hands of average ladder players, or not even average, Legend players, your typical Legend players, which are far from average. Garrote Rogue is absolutely a deck that requires a ton of skill and a ton of playtime, and the results are absolutely there. 7.5% up from Legend to top 1k Legend is almost unheard of. It is one of the most skill-testing decks that we have ever seen at Vicious Syndicate. And I will say that personally, when I was playing in top 100 last week and earlier this week, that Rogue felt almost unbeatable at times, and the way that my opponents were able to navigate game states was incredibly impressive. But that experience just isn't something that the rest of the ladder shares, because the deck is so much worse outside of that level of skill and rank on the ladder. takes a ton of energy and is just very difficult to play and requires a lot of nuance and practice. So, something to be aware of, that it is a real deck, and I think the high-level players having concerns about the play experience and the win rate is something that we can actually see in the data now. What they're experiencing, the rest of the ladder is experiencing is not the same thing. And typically, while high legend players dominating with decks is because those players are so much better, in this case, the deck really does rise to the occasion. So yeah, something to be aware of. But the number one deck on this list is Aggro Taunt Druid, and I think that we should talk about that for Decksplanations. So let's do that. Here we go.
So some of you folks may have been playing the game as long as I have, and you hear Taunt Druid, because some people will not call this Aggro Taunt Druid, they'll just call it Taunt Druid, and your mind does a double take like, wait, hang on. When did that become a thing? There's no Hadronox. There's no Lich King. We're not playing big, beefy taunts. No. Taunt Druid now is an aggro deck, relying pretty heavily on mana cheat in a couple of forms, but it's kind of in keeping with sort of the combo-y aggressive style of deck, much like the Zoo Warlocks that would pop off with Dark Glare before. Aggro Taunt Druid is an aggressive deck where you're trying to just build a massive board in the early turns, and here you're really trying to win with Arbor up if you can help it, or at the very least make a board that you can composting and then just keep flooding with successive boards until they're dead. And it is pretty good at handling other aggressive decks because it runs a bunch of taunts, so they're not going to be able to get at your face pretty quickly, and you get to protect your key minions. So this is a deck that actually makes Peasant really good, particularly if you are on the play. Taking a look at key cards in the mulligan, Peasant, 58.3%. But that is not number one. That is shortly behind Razormane Battleguard at 62 point. Is that a 7?
62.7%. That is the Incanter's Flow of this deck. It is Razormane Battleguard is a card that is so good that I envision that it will.
Lord Keleseth.
It is a Keleseth equivalent. Yeah, it's not going to stay at its current configuration, I think, for its entire life in Standard. I imagine there will be a point where either this gets changed to reduced by 1 or gets changed to a 3-drop. It's incredibly powerful, especially in the opener, game warping, deck warping. It's really strong, and there are a lot of games where if you coin this out on turn 1, the game is effectively decided by turn 3. There have been a bunch of games, especially the blowout games that I've had, are like if I'm against a slow druid and I go coin Battleguard Bone Chewer into like Pack Mule Watch Posts, they'll just go. They'll just leave. So it's Battleguard is really great, but Peasant going first is incredible to the point where the stats that we're looking at here, they're for both going first and going second. I would imagine that going first it is probably similarly powerful to Battleguard because you play it in turn 1, then if your opponent has their turn 1 pre-booked, if they play a quest, then this thing is probably living. Let's say have like coin, brain freeze, or whatever. Otherwise, sometimes they will waste the coin and hero power, or if their hero power kills your thing, and that means that they aren't doing anything and they're also wasted the coin. Or sometimes they just can't do anything about it, and then your turn 2 was either Infestation or a Taunt, and then you draw like 4 extra cards with it and you win. It's quite good.
Yeah, I would say it's really important to look at Peasant and realize the win rate isn't that high necessarily because it is drawing you a ton of cards when you keep it and play it on 1. It is because your opponents go out of their way to deal with this. You will playing a 1-mana 2/1 that says destroy the opponent's coin is pretty good 2/1 because that's effectively what it is sometimes if you're forcing your opponent to coin out a hero power that kills it. And it becomes a lot better in this deck, even when you're on coin, because that means you get to do something like, play a taunt on 2 and, maybe play another taunt plus peasant on 3, something like that. There's a lot of ways that against decks that are also board-based for removing things, your taunts get in the way to protect your important minions. That's part of why Razormane Battleguard is so powerful, is because it gives you mana cheat, and the thing that it's cheating protects itself. So you get a snowball effect if your opponent doesn't have some kind of removal that doesn't care about the board. Another card that is very important to this deck is Oracle of Elune. This is one of your cards that helps you just make really massive boards, except instead of doing it with mana cheat in terms of discounts, it's mana cheat in that it makes a copy of the thing. So it makes your minions that cost 2 or less, when you play them, it summons a copy. There are a bunch of games that you can get by sort of waiting until turn 4 and going Oracle of Elune and Vibrant Squirrel, because getting 8 acorns in your deck that when you draw summons a 2/1 is really good refill, particularly if you're able to stick a composting so that your opponent is in this sort of double bind position where they remove your board, and then much like Death Rattle Demon Hunter, you suddenly have a new board, except in this way, it's because you drew a bunch of cards off composting and just like top decked the nuts, literally, and drew all these squirrels.
I'm proud of you. That was very good. Yeah, the deck is surprisingly resilient when it gets going. There will absolutely be games where you get soul rended into. It's not just decks that kill your stuff. It's decks that kill your stuff and then kill you. And Handlock in particular, with the Soul Rend into the Baron Scavenger Bristleback turns, you don't lose when they clear your board. You lose when they play 2/6/6 taunts and kill your stuff. But it is Oracle of Elune goes a long way here. And something that's important to note, if you have an Oracle of Elune in your hand, it's turn 3, probably play the Oracle of Elune. Probably just cast it and play it. And then they either have to really go out of their way to kill it, or you go like Bone Chewer, Brawler, Composting, or something, then the game's kind of over. Just play the card on turn 3, because the 4 health breakpoint is kind of hard for decks to beat. You'll not, like, if they have a bunch of stuff in play, if they have a bunch of minions they can trade into it, then obviously don't. But if you have a single taunt, you can set up the Oracle behind it, you are usually fine.
Especially before turn 5.
Yes.
Turn 5, it's way easier, so if you just play it early, then it's more likely to survive. But there's a lot of stuff in this format that deal 2 and 3 damage, and not a lot of stuff that can deal 4. So usually they're going to have to spend a lot to take care of it.
Yep.
Yeah, there will be games where you get out Battle Guard and then Oracle of Elune, and you get to play a free 2-mana taunt and summon a copy, and it's going to feel amazing. And you want to give yourself that chance by running those minions out on curve, but it's not going to happen every time. And that's okay. Just because a bunch of people had the removal for your stuff on curve does not mean that you shouldn't be playing it on curve, because the earlier you play it, the fewer draws they've had to get something to deal with it. And sometimes them going way out of their way to deal with it means that they don't have the removal tools to deal with your more mundane threats.
Yep. And sometimes you go Oracle and they go like Coin Fireball it, and then you say Park Panther pass, and then they take 7 the next turn. It's you can just play your threats. Obviously, that's not what you want to do. What you want to do every game is coin Battle Guard into Taunt, into some other into Taunt Watch Post, into Oracle, into blah blah blah. Like, you want to do the crazy blowout stuff. You don't get to do that every game. But there are plenty of times where by forcing them to use their removal inefficiently, then your threats become more relevant, and they always have to play around the threat of Arbor up starting on turn 5. And if they just play removal and you play and stick a Park Panther, all of a sudden they've got like 1 to 2 turns to live after that, and you can really make it rough on them if you time your threats appropriately. You have a lot of stuff in the deck. The games you lose, you will feel like my deck has no real cards in it, because you whiffed on the composting, you whiffed on the squirrel, and then they kill all your stuff twice, and then you have one card in hand, and you top deck an Adorable Infestation, then they play a Flesh Giant and 2/6/6 taunts, and you're like, why am I doing what I'm doing and not what they're doing? That will be the feeling you get when you lose. But the games where you win, you can get them very quickly. And also, you can absolutely keep up if you draw the composting and the squirrel at the right time. Absolutely something that you can do. There was a game the other day where I was against a Libram Paladin and I fatigued myself. And I won because I drew all of my cards. I was 15 cards ahead of them. And in the following game, I was against a rogue and I fatigued them. They ran out of damage because they had to use their Ethereal Log Merchant to kill my stuff. And then their Garrotes dealt 16 and then the game was over. So it is entirely possible to win either way. There's a lot of nuance to this deck. But also that means that you have to practice it and you have to recognize what matters. And usually it's putting your opponent on the back foot quickly. Usually. Not always. Usually. And that's why you'll note the thing that we said not to keep, or the thing that we didn't say to keep, is Far Watch Post. This card, if you look at the Mulligan stats, 54% win rate when it's kept. It is the 5th worst card in the deck, and it is kept 70% of the time. 70%.
You read my mind on this. I was just going to bring that up. This is a card that is there for very specific matchups. The main one being Quest, Demon Hunter, and to some extent Warlock, I would say. It's another one where it's good.
For Watch Post? This is for the Rogue matchup. That is what this is here for.
Oh, okay.
This is
sure.
The only matchup where you keep it and actually coin it out on one is Rogue. It's the only one.
Really? I wouldn't expect that. I would think it would be those three, but...
Against Rogue, it is the 3rd best keep in the deck. Statistically. So I tried it out today and I won because of it. Their entire deck is entirely functioned on cards being about a mana too cheap and drawing. And so you just play Watch Post, and if they don't have a Brain Freeze, then, that's it. It just lives for a while. They usually want to, Octobot into Shroud. And so you just, if you Watch Post them, they don't want to Shroud on time. If they top deck a Shroud, they can't even play it on time. All of their stuff becomes so incredibly inefficient. So that is the matchup where this is really ideal. And, if you look at the data on HSR, Far Watch Post is the 4th best card in the deck at a 61% win rate. Overall, it is a 54% win rate. If you're against Warlock, it is indeed the best keep in the deck. Looking at that. Against Mage, it is not worth keeping. So it's really just
and that
Warlock
makes perfect sense to me. Because the Mage is filled with a ton of removal. They want you to play early minions so that they can remove them. But that's also a minion that doesn't hit them. So against Mage, you really want to go for that explosive, try and not give you enough time, kill you as quickly as possible. And Far Watch Post doesn't really slow them down because it's just a thing for them to kill.
Oddly enough, when I'm looking at the stats here, these are low keep rates, so be aware that this is something with a low keep rate and a high win rate usually means you keep it when your hand is already good, so I want to make sure we don't fall into that trap of saying always keep this card. But when I'm looking at both the Demon Hunter and the Mage matchups, the number 1 card is Composting, where it's actually correct to keep it if you have other stuff going on. But if your hand is, if your hand sucks, you don't keep Composting, you mulligan, you look for Battle Guard, which is still kept way more, wins just as much, and you need that to happen. But there can be times when your hand is decent, if you have an Adorable Infestation or something along with one of your good cards, and then you have a Composting, you can set up a board where when they clear it, you don't run out of stuff. And that makes a lot of sense against Mage and Demon Hunter specifically. Those are the 2 matchups where Composting is the number 1 card. Again, low keep rate, don't keep it every time, but if your hand allows for it, then it might be worth doing.
I would say another thing to look out for with the Watch Post is that it may not be what you want early against most things, but if you copy it, people are not happy. Later on in the match, once you've established the board and you just want them to not be able to have the answers, sometimes you have the opportunity, you have the board space to Oracle Balloon and Watch Post, and 2 tax is, turns out, better than 1 tax.
There was one time I got this going in the mirror, and then they played Oracle and a 3-mana Peasant, and it didn't copy. Because the card cost 3. So, there are times when the taxing really matters. It's, as long as you're just not over-keeping this and coining it out in matchups where it's not good, then the card is fine. But there are a lot of times where people are keeping Watch Post and then losing, and it's because Watch Post does not belong in your opening hand most of the time. There is also a noted counter synergy with Greybow that is going to happen every so often where it lands in the post and then it lives there. Usually, I think that means you probably don't play Greybow at that point. It's if you have a board that's heavy on watch posts and it's stymieing your opponent, probably just chill if you've got a couple of them, and maybe develop some other threats. But there are times you have to play it, and then it's just a thing that happens sometimes.
We had an interesting mirror match when I was doing a coaching with, I believe, Mage of Death, where we didn't get the Greybow as early as them, so we were really struggling to fight for board, but then they played a 2-post, and Greybow was definitely the thing that was keeping them ahead of us. And somehow, even though they got like a augmented Alec that shuffled in a couple of really good cards, like an extra Arbor up and things, we managed to beat them because they played this 2-post, and we just never killed it after the Greybow Death Rattle went onto the 2-post. And we got our Greybow rolling, never played our watch posts, and just got there because the deck is all about board. So when you're in the mirror, something like Greybow is really, really tough to deal with.
It's I found Greybow to be actually less relevant than I thought it would be, but it's still, when it comes up a lot. People kind of hyper-focus on the dream, the turn 6 dream of Oracle, Battle Guard, Greybow. They kind of hyper-focus on that idea of getting 2 of them. That's come up for me like twice, and it's nice unless they have Talon's Darkness, Immolation Aura, and then it doesn't matter because they both die. But there are times when it comes up, just don't hold your cards for that sort of thing. Overall, I think the general play pattern is pretty straightforward, but people feel like there has to be more to the opening turns than there is. It is usually play the best thing in your hand on curve. Not always. Just not always that. Sometimes you want to wait, and you want to Aug Merchant and Hero Power a little bit, or composting if you know you're going into the Fire Sale or Soul Rent turn. But most of the time, what you're doing is you're playing your best card on curve. However, that means Oracle of Elune pass. Feels like you're doing something wrong. You're not. Park Panther pass. Feels like you're doing something wrong, but you're not. Sometimes you even just fire off a Greybow on an empty board. You'd prefer Teacher's Pet, but like, play your thing and hit them. That's what you have to do. You have ways to sequence your cards where you can get composting going and draw a bunch and get a bunch of acorns and then kill them with the Arbor Up. There are other times where your best turn 5 is Arbor Up pass. It's not what you want to do, but you generally play as close to the curve as possible to keep pressure on your opponent, and you're pretty good at it. Now, there are some matchups where that's a good thing, some matchups where it's not. If there is a lot of AoE going on, then you're going to have to play a little bit different. If there's a lot of, like, if you're expecting to see a lot of Immolation Auras, a lot of Soul Rends, you have to be aware of that and you have to hold back a bit, or you have to mulligan for composting. And the first board you have to make sure leads you into a second board. In particular, the matchup I get the most questions about is the Mage matchup. The Mage matchup, slightly unfavored for the Druid. Not majorly, but slightly. So, first of all, don't keep far watch posts in this matchup. Very important. You can keep composting if your hand is good. Go first Peasant, absolutely want to keep it. Go second Peasant, throw it back. Battle Guard and Oracle are vital in this matchup. The real question is, how do I navigate Fire Sale? So, the way to navigate Fire Sale is, well, I'm going to say it's going to sound stupid. Going into their 4-mana turn, have minions with 4 health or Divine Shield, or hold stuff back. And do you beat the second Fire Sale? No, probably not. But you have to play as though they don't have it, and you should probably assume that they have the first one, unless, and this is the hard part, unless you can't play around Fire Sale and have a hope of winning the game. If your hand is bad, you have a mediocre hand, you don't have card draw, you don't have composting, you don't have Teacher's Pet to follow up, the only way that you have a chance of winning is by going wide with stuff that dies to Fire Sale. Just do it. You might lose. But the thing that makes the Mage win the most is time. So you have to evaluate, can I weather the storm of a Fire Sale? Can I win if they have it or not? And if you can win if they have it, then you can hold back. if you can't win if they have it, but holding back makes you too slow to kill them anyways, just play your stuff. Hope it works out. But if you have a wide enough board where you have a bunch of stuff and then you play an Oracle going into their turn 4, Fire Sale doesn't kill it and then you get to refuel. You give them a choice where, do I go for the Fire Sale or do I go for something else to kill this Oracle, and then you get to keep hitting them with your other minions. Sometimes they have the hot streak, that's rough. Don't want to see that. But can't win them all. It is unfavored slightly, 55-45. But the way to beat them is to be aware of how much you need to make them have it, and then to plan around it going into their 4-mana turn however you can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's those kinds of micro decisions are why I do like aggressive decks a lot of the time. You know, I don't always play them, but I do enjoy them, and I, you know, take issue with anyone that has the tendency to say like, oh, aggro decks are brain dead, right? That's kind of a narrative that, you know, we really try and dispel here, because there are so many little things like that where it's just this one decision that could win you or lose you the game. And, you know, people can be very results oriented and thinking like, oh, I played all my stuff and they had the fire sale and I lost. That was the wrong decision. No, it could totally be the right decision and they just happened to have it. But what would feel really bad is if you don't play all your stuff, and so that means you don't have enough threats out, and they're able to use some of their single target removal to thin up the board. And then when you truly feel like you have no choice because, I don't know, some other things pushed you in that direction and you throw it all out there, now they've had the time to get the fire sale because you didn't pressure enough earlier and they were able to slow things down with other removal. So that is going to be a thing that you just have to get used to with this deck, is just, yeah, play your best stuff on curve and do that little analysis as much as you can in terms of, okay, there's this card they could have, Soul Rend or Fire Sale, whatever it may be. Can I afford to play around it? That's going to help you get those percentage points against, you know, the decks that have those clears.
Yep. And should be clear, if you just always make them have it and throw stuff in play and just constantly slam your cards every turn, you're going to lose a lot more than if you think about it. There can be times where not thinking and thinking leads you to the same play, but it doesn't mean that you didn't behave differently if you contemplate it. Because if you contemplate it and you think the best thing for me to do here is just slam my stuff in play and hope they don't have it, then that's good, as opposed to doing that every time, losing the fire sale, and then going on Twitter to complain about the meta being uninteractive. That's a different circumstance. Because there will absolutely be times as well where you look at the board state and you say, you know what, I can afford to chill here for a second, I'm going to play a 2-drop in hero power instead of developing further. Absolutely something that you can do. Most of the matchups otherwise are somewhat straightforward. You tend to be pretty strong against any kind of aggressive deck, Face Hunter in particular. And Shadow Priest, I think, in a way stopped existing because this deck started existing. Because there's never been a deck better against Void Touch Tenant than this one. You go so wide so quickly and you stop all their stuff from hitting face. I actually believe Razormane, Battleguard, and Friends is the reason why combo decks are so good, is because all the other aggro decks really have trouble living. They still can be fine, and you can still absolutely lose to Face Hunter in particular. I've seen a lot more Face Hunters with True Aim Crescent, and that card is really bad for us. Really bad for us. Breaks Divine Shield and also allows Trampling Rhino to be a Pyroblast that kills 2 things. So absolutely still possible to lose those matchups, but you're generally pretty favored. Generally, not always. I don't know. This is the deck that I definitely had the most success with this season. It was the one that I played all the way into top 50, and it was competitive even there. But I roped a lot, because there are a surprising number of decisions that are compressed into a short period, and also you can go long and go into late games and run Demon Hunters and Rogues out of cards. That is a thing that you can do. It's hard to do. You think about it, but it's very powerful. So definitely recommend trying this out, especially if you like decks that are... The games tend to be a little bit faster, but you're capable of dealing with the long game too. All right.
I had thoughts, but you two covered it.
cool.
Oh,
My
sorry,
only
Bott.
thought left is that I can't wait until we can replace Teacher's Pet with literally any other card. And
Teacher's Pet is good. It's good.
no, it's not.
Yes, it is. I think this card
No.
is the most misunderstood in this deck. I play this on turn 3 a lot with Battle Guard. A lot of times when you have a better play on 5.
Man, that must be nice.
But when you
God, I
have a
would
better play on
love-
5, you have an Arbor up on 5, a lot of time you just do Teacher's Pet Pass. It just is a body that gives you another body. That's all it
No.
is.
What's it like to have your battle cores live for a turn? What's that like?
It's very pleasant. I recommend it.
How is that a reality that you live in?
Sometimes they don't have a burn spell. I don't know. Sometimes they play against a Paladin. They're like, well, I guess I'm done. Except for when the Paladin has Samuro. We don't like Samuro. Samuro's not fun for us.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of times where Teacher's Pet is just a body that is a pain for them to attack into, both with their face and with their minions, that leaves something to get arbored up behind. It spits
tell me
out
the first card you would remove from this deck and replace. The first card that comes to mind that you'd be like, I could do it. This could be a better card.
the Argent Squire.
I mean, I'd take an Argent Squire over a Teacher's Pet any day.
Teacher's Pet has been
Argent
good for
Squire's gonna
me.
live.
It's got a
I mean,
lot of
think
health
about
break
how
points
good-
against damage-based removal. And there have been a few times lately. Yesterday, my opponent fell Demon Hunter. They Magtherodoned me. And my Teacher's Pet spit out the Water Moccasin, the stealthy snake that if it's your only minion, it has poison. Teacher's Pet was awesome! It was so good!
Yeah, it's
I played
probably
against a
real good
big
there.
warrior earlier today. My Teacher's Pet spit out a Stone Skin Basilisk. The 1/1 Divine Shield Poison. Nice big warrior deck, idiot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if that's what it's spitting out and it stops spitting out those stupid owls, then sure.
I had a
guess
Teacher's Pet. They summoned
Teacher's Pet always spit out Mukla, then I'm down. Sure.
I had a
Just
Teacher's
give me a
Pet. They
Mukla every
coined
time
out
I'm good.
Commencement into Troublemaker. Both 3/3s hit the pet. The Poison Basilisk came out. I hit their Troublemaker, and they left the game. This could happen to you.
Wait, how did you beat their Rattlegore? Did they just
They were-
die before they got to Rattlegore, or...
They were depending on that Troublemaker surviving so that they did not die, and that was
Okay.
not what happened.
All right.
I played stuff
I was
before
gonna
that turn.
say, Yeah.
It's my curve that game was Park Panther on 4, Teacher's Pet on 5, Greybow on 6. That was my curve. I had an awful draw. I think I played 1/1 drop or 2 drop or whatever, and they just killed it. And so I went Panther go, Pet go, Greybow go. They coined Commencement, and then stuff. And then all the things I just said happened. And it was good enough.
Park Panther is like the craziest card that goes from like really good when they have minions to really bad when they don't and it dies right away to really good if they don't and then it lives a turn. It has like a huge would you call that a delta just in like
It's
the
got
scale of which how
the
good
valley,
that card is?
the Park Panther Valley in the middle, when it's like, it's really good except the times when you're right in the middle and it sucks. But
Yeah.
But
and
hold
then
on,
it's, and
but
then
hold
it's
on.
worse than Teacher's Pet.
So, a minion that you have to play, and hope it lives for a good thing to happen, and if it doesn't, then it's bad for you. That's board-based Hearthstone, baby! That's what people are asking for! Play my 4-drop, and I hope it's good enough!
I mean, I hope that people are playing minions for Park Panther to attack into because
Yeah.
The game feels probably at it relatively unhealthy is what I'll say.
Yeah.
when you have to add minions to your spell mage deck because when you play the mirror you need to be able to kill your own minions to progress your quest line.
That's what Primordial Studies is for. But yeah, it's generally the format has more minions than it doesn't, and so people have talked about cutting Park Panther for Kazakus. I think that's crazy because of how good Park Panther is, and really the way that I think about it is the 5-mana golem that deals 3 to 2 things. Park Panther is that without playing Kazakus. You just always get the golem that deals 3 to 2 things, except it can go face sometimes, and you don't have to play a 4-mana 3/3 first. So I think that it's just worth keeping Park Panther. I have seen Kazakus be good, but I think Park Panther is reliably good, and also the damage being able to go face is relevant. Also,
And you get 2 of them.
if you play quickly out of habit, and you tend to play all your cards and then hero power and attack face and then attack with your minions, that is a habit that you have. It is a habit that I have. Remember to attack with your Park Panther first, because otherwise your opponent takes 1 and then you get +3 attack. And it's not great for us as the druid, or for me as the person that did that recently in a top 100 game, and I won anyway. Never punished.
Hashtag never punished.
Never punished.
And that's a great way to cap off this Decksplanations on.
Yep. It happens to all of us. So, we have many folks we'd like to thank. Change the scene here. So, thanks everyone for tuning in. We have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section at the website at coinconcede.com. You can find our contact info, show notes, and patron information. You can support us at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. Write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. Like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number 3, Doge DK, Proby1, Crush Cap, Beef Squatch, David P, Snowpack, Lucky, Fade to Black, Walu, Ponius, and Itinerant Wizard. Number 3, Mr. Bungalow, thank you so much for your subs during the show. Botticus, who you got?
So I had 2 more BG coaching sessions over the weekend, and I think that moving forward, I'm going to request that is the way we do coaching sessions, where I play a game and then we play a game with them, because really I just get out so much more information when I'm able to control the mouse. And yeah, I just think it went really well, and hopefully both of them got a lot of information out of it. And yeah, looking forward to doing more of those in the future for sure.
Edelweiss?
So a few coin concedes this week. Mage Death to start with. Had that crazy mirror. It was really a blast coaching Aggro Druid. Slissa, Puns and Buns, and Alkali Lake all reached out to me after I had sort of some questions about makeup and things. And I'm actually going to talk with Alkali next week to discuss sort of branding. Yeah, it'll be a nice chat. I really appreciate that she was willing to take some time out of her week to help me out.
She's good at that stuff. Yeah. Who am I going conceding to this week? I don't know. Actually, I know who I'm going conceding to. Mad at Arms. The great Mad at Arms, who you may know from the Squelch podcast or from everywhere else. Tweeted today, controversial opinion time. I like Hearthstone right now, it's fun, but sometimes I don't like it, so I play other things. I found this take to be mind-blowing. Truly unanticipated and unexpected. Really made me reevaluate how I look at things. So, Matt, thank you for saying something that was both controversial and brave. Check out more hot takes like that over in the Squelch podcast. Yeah. That's going to do it for our show this week. So, keep calm and keep Battle Guard. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
All right.
I had such a banger transition, and then I realized there was another page of news.
What was it? Tell us.
Oh, it was where we were talking about tech cards, and then it was going to move into tournaments with Monsanto's lineup, and then, oops.
That's what you get. Stopping recording. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to have to figure out a Decksplanations in advance next week, because it's going to be a drought for sure.
It's okay, Edelweiss. I always think I come up with great transitions and then hat re-transitions after I've already transitioned.
I can't help it.
What was this, 311?
311. If I remember the lyrics to any 311 songs, I would sing them right now, but I don't. Haven't thought about that band in a very long time.
That's a band?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. High school band.
Although I don't know any of them, because when you say 311, the only thing that comes to my head is Sum 41, which is a very different thing.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Different numbers. All right. Twitch chat, thank you so much for being here. We will talk to you next week.
Bye.